Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming along to this side event under the title of Ratifying and Implementing the BBNJ Agreement, Efforts and Challenges. We're absolutely delighted to be here this afternoon, and it's been a wonderful partnership with the Global Ocean Forum, ourselves at the World Maritime University. We're part of the International Maritime Organization, Ireland, and we have the Ambassador, Deputy Representative here with us for remarks. Grenada, Barbados, the Alliance of Small Island States, UNEP, OPOC, IOTC, the World Conservation Monitoring Centre, and the Inter-American Association for Environmental Defence, Grid Arendal, and the Universidad Católica Norte. So a wonderful host of intergovernmental bodies, states and NGOs to host this particular event this afternoon. And now the schedule is pretty tight, and it's divided into two parts. The first part has a keynote address from Ambassador Nuala Ní Mhuircheartaigh, Deputy Representative at the Irish Mission. Thereafter, we have panel one, which will focus on national and regional efforts and challenges in relation to the ratification and implementation of the BBNJ Agreement. And we have some very distinguished panelists, which I will introduce later. Thereafter, we have panel two, which will focus on capacity building initiatives, advancing BBNJ ratification. And of course, the session will be closed out by Ms. Susan Gardner from UNEP. So thank you very much, Susan, for being with us. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Ambassador Nuala Ní Mhuircheartaigh to take to the floor with your opening remarks. You're very welcome, Madam Ambassador.
Thank you, Professor, and dear colleagues and delegates, I'm honoured to be with you this afternoon representing Ireland to welcome you to this important panel event. And my sincere thanks go first to the organisers, to the World Maritime University, Global Ocean Institute, Global Ocean Forum, and of course UNEP. I'd also like to acknowledge and welcome all the distinguished panellists here, and I've no doubt that their deep knowledge and their real practical experience of ocean governance will bring us a really engaging dialogue today. Colleagues, as you all know, we're meeting at a crucial time when the BBNJ Agreement is on the verge of reaching the 60 ratifications needed to enter into force. And it's worth taking a moment to recall that while the development and the negotiation of this agreement took almost 20 years, it's now just over 2 years since the international community achieved what was a historic milestone in adopting the BBNJ Agreement. In that very short time period, we've seen remarkable progress towards its entry into force, with 53 ratifications to date. Now, that said, and speaking very frankly, given that Ireland is one of those states that hasn't yet completed our ratification process, the truth is that the BBNJ does present complex challenges when it comes to ratification and also effective implementation. And so the subject of today's discussion around efforts and challenges in ratifying and implementing the BBNJ is extremely practical and relevant. Some of the challenge, of course, could be partly due to the agreement's innovative and broad-ranging subject matter. It's often described as 4 treaties in one, and the wide range of its subject matter can be quite difficult to explain to a lay audience. And so even at that foundational level, it can be difficult to get the engagement that's needed across multiple government departments to achieve ratification. Effective implementation will bring unique challenges too. I'm thinking, for example, of the fact that the BBNJ aims to create a more coherent and coordinated system of ocean governance, while bearing in mind its core principle of operating within and not undermining existing frameworks and bodies. Giving life to this structure and ensuring that the BBNJ will complement and not compete with the authority and the mandates of existing bodies will be a delicate balance. Ireland also recognises that financial and technological constraints can present significant barriers to ratification and implementation, particularly for developing states. And that's why we're so pleased to partner with the WMU to fund the BBNJ Clinic, which is shown here behind us as well. That's clearly part of our commitment to capacity building, which is an integral part of this agreement. The BBNJ Clinic aims to empower developing states to accelerate their ratification processes. It includes training and capacity building workshops and model legislation drafting sessions. Its initial focus is on assisting SIDS and coastal LDCs. And if I may, their participation is absolutely critical, not only due to their vast ocean jurisdictions, but also to ensure that we realise the sustainability, conservation and redistributive aims of the BBNJ. Now, I don't want to hold up the substance anymore, so just to conclude, I'm going to say that today's event, from Ireland's perspective, is a really important forum and platform for our panellists to share practical experience and the lessons learned in ratifying and implementing the agreement. Personally, I'm really excited to hear their insights. I know there's a lot to learn for Ireland and the other states that, like us, are still on this path towards ratification as soon as we can. So thanks all for your participation and with best wishes for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. And I think you've really set up the afternoon for this particular side event. It's a great pleasure to introduce our distinguished panellists who will speak to the topic of efforts and challenges in relation to both ratification and implementation. Penny Suvanakama, a Senior Advisor at the Ocean Policy and Governance at the Office of the Pacific Ocean Commissioner. Thank you very much, Penny, for being with us. Ms. Angelique Pouponneau, who's the Oceans Lead for the Alliance of Small Island States. Ms. Juliette Babb-Riley from Barbados, and of course, very distinguished alumni of our university, Dr. Khalil Hassan Ali. Ladies and gentlemen of the panel, you're very, very welcome here this afternoon. And I'd like to turn the microphone over to my colleague, Assistant Professor Reen Derrick, who will take the session forward, in particular in relation to the questions which the panelists will now address. Reen, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us today for this event. It's lovely to see you all. We're going to structure the discussion around two guiding questions. Our panelists will respond to the same two guiding questions in less than 4 minutes because we are working to quite a tight timeline. We will proceed in the order that the panelists appear on the program. The two guiding questions are, first, what topics regulated by the BBNJ Agreement will require most domestic-level implementation work? And second, how can knowledge and capacities needed for such implementation be effectively shared by SIDS? So those are the questions we're considering. With that, I'll turn the floor over to our first panelist, Penny Suvanakama, from the Office of the Pacific Ocean Commissioner. Penny, you have the floor. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, moderator, and also I wanted to take this time to thank the organizers for this event, for allowing an opportunity or platform to come and convey some of the ongoing work in the various regions of the small island developing states. For the Pacific, I just maybe wanted to share at the beginning that for the Pacific region, we are a region that's sectorally organized. We have regional organizations that support our members, are organized sectorally. For example, we have Fisheries Regional Organization, FFA. We have Environment Regional Organization, SPREP, USP, as well as the political organization, the Pacific Islands Forum. So in a way that has informed the way that we have participated in the negotiations, and also looking like the outlook of how we will proceed with implementation. The role of the Office of the Pacific Ocean Commissioner is to sort of coordinate the advice that's given from these regional organizations. We often collaborate very closely, and the mandate on BBNJ is different in the sense that the elements fall within the different sectors. It doesn't all fit neatly under one particular regional organization in the Pacific. So, for example, if you take an element like EIA, we have a regional organization that looks after the environment, that is the authority on environment impact assessments. And so there are other sectors as well. For example, as I mentioned earlier, for the Pacific, for the fisheries sector is quite important. So we have our regional organization that looks after fisheries that is involved in the negotiations. In terms of the specific topics, perhaps maybe the governance, domesticating, the governance aspect. Of course, we are carrying out national workshops as well. We have so far in 2024 conducted around 4 national workshops with 4 national governments. And the slides come up. I wanted to say also that our leaders have pronounced themselves, our political leaders are following intimately the progress of the negotiations. Since 2017, they have pronounced themselves, encouraging members' participation. But this is the mandate on BBNJ as of the leaders' meeting in August of last year, encouraging the expeditious ratification of BBNJ. In 2023, when negotiations concluded, they had sort of acknowledged and also probed countries to proceed with the implementation phase. Maybe I ask for the next slide, please. So some of the actions that we've undertaken, I know that there are topics, for example, I'm saying that for the Pacific, we have different regional organizations that look after various sectors. We will need to take this instrument, whilst domesticating nationally, we will need to take this instrument to sensitize the various governing bodies on environment, on fisheries, so that they are well informed of the progress of implementation, or where even the PrepCom discussions I had. Just yesterday, I met with some of our colleagues from the regional organizations that, hey, we need to turn up to the governing bodies of these regional organizations, and we need to update them. Maybe we need experts to be nominated and all those things. We should readily start to flag this. Apart from the national sensitization process, the domestication of the treaty, getting the broad awareness work on the BBNJ instrument is quite important. So we are starting off now starting to look at various governing bodies for different regional organizations, but of course supporting our national governments through national workshops, focused at the moment on early ratification. So there are some elements that are coming out clearly from the national consultation. So far, the Pacific, we have sort of 7 countries that have ratified. And we have also conducted 7 national workshops in our region. So there are certainly going to be, there's certainly work underway for other countries. But one thing I wanted to mention is, one thing that's coming out clearly is, of course, for ratification, there are different processes nationally, different systems of parliament. And of course, one of the major steps that we are seeing coming through, that's coming through in the consultation, is the need for legislative gap analysis before countries take steps toward ratification. Maybe I'll end it there, moderator.
Thank you so much for those remarks. So with that, and considering the same guiding questions, I'll pass the floor to Angelique Poupano of the Alliance of Small Island States. Angelique, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And you could almost deep dive on each question for a very long time, so I'll try not to. I think thanks for the opportunity to be here, and happy to be one of the co-sponsors of this event. And just full disclosure, I'm from the Seychelles, so you'll hear me refer a lot to the Seychelles in terms of experiences. But I wanted to start with an anecdote, and I think this was back in 2008, 2009, and piracy was becoming a huge thing in the Gulf of Aden. And one of the things that happened was a suspected pirate was caught on the high seas and tried and was brought to trial in the Seychelles. We didn't have the right definition of piracy in our law book. It was incorrectly incorporated in the domestication process, which meant, obviously, the person or the suspected pirate did not get found to be guilty of piracy because they were being tried against a definition that wasn't actually accurate, right? And I use this example to say that there is an element of ratification, which of course it varies among small island developing states. We obviously inherited very different legal systems, some dualist, some monist, some a mixture of the two. But one of the things that we need to bear in mind is that domestication process, how it is actually incorporated into your national law. And there's a lot of questions around what should one incorporate to give effect to the BBNJ agreement. And here I'd also even push ourselves to say, do we know everything that needs to be incorporated at this point in time? Do we also need to give ourselves space to allow for almost a continuous attempt to make sure that we are effectively implementing the BBNJ agreement as we continue to make decisions into the future? But just to give, in addition to that, 2 additional points. One, many small island developing states don't have these administrative databases that are expected to be in place for MGRs, for example, and others would need to consider how we strengthen the flag state responsibility and port state responsibility. And of course, SIDS are not homogeneous. It's a group of very diverse group of countries, and also with very diverse interests. So it'll be very interesting to see how we approach domestication in particular. And in addition to add some complexity to what is a group of very diverse countries, is also that we are terribly plagued by capacity constraints, right? We have typically a legal drafting unit of the Attorney General's chambers. If it has 2 people, very robust, right? Extremely robust. And just to get legislative drafters into the country is extremely costly. And what that means is that we're very reliant of these being churned out as consultancies, and oftentimes not necessarily done by people who have the knowledge and the understanding of the different interests that exist within the country. And then finally, because I'm looking at time here, and finally, the one thing to say is there is utility in this idea of, and you know, as sort of we go closer to the Caribbean, towards the end of the panel, there is benefit in countries that are more similar or have similar regional interest. But I'm from the Seychelles, where the ACE region, as it is referred to, isn't actually a region, right? So our legal systems, Seychelles, Maldives, Cabo Verde, Sao Tome and Principe, they're already quite different and very diverse. So we need to be careful in the way in which we approach, we take approaches to domestication. This cannot be a one-size-fits-all model. This cannot be sort of a model law that works really well in the UK or Norway, just sort of being transposed into small island developing states because of those fundamental differences in interests, legal systems, amongst other things. So that would be my final point, just to always bear in mind when it comes to SIDS, different layers of complexity, but also it really cannot be a one-size-fits-all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll pass the floor now over to Juliet Babb-Riley. Juliet, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and just quickly to thank the organizers for this side event and to stand on existing protocol. Barbados, along with several other CARICOM member states, have ratified the agreement, and so in essence, what we will now need to do is to look at how we domesticate the agreement into our legislative requisite legislative provisions to give effect to the treaty. In some of our member states, they already have legislation with respect to biodiversity in areas within national jurisdiction. However, in several of our countries, we will need to develop legislative provisions. And so for the next slide. I just wanted to highlight here quickly some of the provisions that the BBNJ agreement called for. I'm limiting my comments to part 2 of the agreement. And because, as I indicated, many of us are not active in this area and areas beyond national jurisdiction, it will mean that for most of us, we will have to implement requisite legislative provisions. And as I mentioned just now, those who already have ABS legislation, it would involve the harmonization of existing legislation. In the case of Barbados, we do not have ABS legislation, so we'll need to start from scratch. Next slide. Here, I just wanted to highlight some of the administrative and policy measures that we will need to put in place. Again, particularly because we do not have existing ABS legislation. We're not a party to the Nagoya Protocol. So, for example, we will need to look at the designation of national authority, BBNJ focal points, establishment of modalities for the specific conduct of periodic review of a needs assessment in relation to what is required under the agreement. In terms of the clearinghouse mechanism, we will have to designate the entities that will be responsible for reporting or verifying information to the BBNJ clearinghouse mechanism, establishing modalities for monitoring, compliance, etc. If you can go quickly to the next slide then, and this is in relation to question 2. In terms of the CARICOM experience, we were able to effectively use our existing regional institutions, in particular the CARICOM Secretariat, the University of the West Indies, and the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism during the PrepCom phase, throughout the IGC phases, and presently we're doing the same in the preparatory commission phase. And these regional institutions were able to provide technical support to our negotiators in New York. And so the creation of programs that are regionally focused and targeted should assist us greatly in implementing the agreement, bearing in mind, as Angelique noted, that not all SIS are the same. And then we are able to, because we have this background in place, as indicated, we can utilize these existing regional institutions, bearing in mind, of course, that there's opportunity to develop new regional institutions to give effect to the BBNJ agreement. So with that, I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And now I'll pass the floor to our final panelist, which is Khalil Hassan Ali, the Institute of Marine Affairs, Trinidad and Tobago. Khalil, you have the floor.
Thanks, Rian. And let me just start by thanking the organizers for inviting me to be part of this event, and also thank my fellow panelists for their insightful thoughts and comments. So, of course, I must say that all the topics across the BBNJ package are important, but I do think that the topics that will require the most domestic level implementation work are those related to the MGRs and the EIA parts, because of the breadth of individual state responsibility in those parts. Juliet just said a bit about MGRs already, so I'll take this opportunity to say a bit on EIAs. As a state seeking to become party to the agreement or already party to the agreement, we need to think about what we need to put in place domestically to enable us to fulfill obligations and exercise rights under the agreement as it relates to part 4 on EIAs. And of course, parties to the to the BBNJ agreement will need to have domestic legislation in place that will allow for the EIA process, detailed in Part 4, to be wholesomely carried out. Now, the conduct of EIA is recognized as customary international law, and most, if not all, countries in the world have legislation and systems in place to ensure the conduct of EIA. But it's very likely that these already existing domestic processes differ from what is needed as prescribed in the agreement when pertaining to proposed activities in areas beyond national jurisdiction. So work definitely needs to be done in this regard to ensure that any given party can fulfill its obligations, including as it relates to, among other things, notification and public consultation, actually conducting EIAs, reviewing EIAs, making decisions on EIAs, and monitoring and reviewing permitted activities. And the fact that all states have some sort of experience in conducting EIAs, this is a good thing. Of course, some have more experience than others, especially as it relates to EIAs in the marine environment and also in areas beyond national jurisdiction. And SIDS, we know, may not have as much experience in conducting EIAs in areas beyond national jurisdiction. But SIDS do have experiences and lessons to share amongst each other, and indeed with the global community. And I think getting SIDS in the same room to learn from each other in a structured way about what works and what does not work in their particular EIA processes is important. Things like, how do you decide if an EIA is actually required? Who within the country evaluates EIAs? How is public consultation conducted, and how is participation encouraged? These things are important that we learn from each other. Beyond this, I think getting SIDS to collectively then think about the BBNJ Agreement EIA process and what more is needed legally, procedurally, administratively, and technically is also very essential. It will get the wheels turning and have SIDS. If we get SIDS into the room, into rooms with each other, it will get the wheels turning and have SIDS feeding off each other, identifying gaps and capacity needs, and really creating institutional cross-linkages. And I saw it in practice earlier this year with a workshop that was hosted by the Ireland WMU BBNJ Clinic Program, hosted in Grenada, and definitely feel that more such workshops are needed, covering all parts of the agreement and across SIDS regions, both intra-regionally and interregionally. And I definitely look forward to more of that sort of engagement through the BBNJ, Ireland WMU BBNJ program, as well as other programs that may be in existence. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So we have about 10 minutes for a question and answer session with the panelists now. So I'd like to open the floor to anybody in the audience who would like to pose a question. Perhaps the most effective way to proceed would be if I gather about 3 questions from anyone in the audience who would like to ask one, and then we can pose those to our panelists. And if we have time, we will do a second round. But again, we do have to be conscious of time, and so I would ask anyone who would like to pose a question to please pose it in a brief, clear, question-like way, being conscious of time limitations. Thank you. So the floor is open to anybody who would like to ask a question. No, I don't see anybody. Ah, yes, sorry. Yes, Daniel, please, the floor is yours.
I didn't initially have my hand up, but just to maybe break the ice. Khalil mentioned that among the provisions in the BBNJ agreement, the MGR part is one of those that may require domestic legislation. I think it's fair to say that there are some provisions in Part 2 that leave a certain openness to how to interpret them. And I'd be really curious how states that are currently working on implementing legislation or have already worked on implementing legislation are approaching those elements where there is some flexibility on interpretation. For example, in terms of the granularity of pre-cruise notifications. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, David Johnson. Thank you. And another question here, Rama. Yes, you have the floor. I think if you raise your hand and press the microphone button, you should be able to activate the microphone. Yep.
Is it on? Good. Ramakrishna from the Woodsole Oceanographic Institution. Thank you very much for the panelists and the discussion on this very important topic. The question, one comment and a question. The comment is not all countries need to adopt enabling legislation. There are dualist states and the monist states, and the monist states can implement the treaty once they ratify it. Having said that, since the subject matter is beyond national jurisdiction, as the enabling legislations are adopted, there is a potential for conflicts between and amongst them. How do you deal with that? Any recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So perhaps now we could pose those three questions to our panelists. And then if we have time, as I say, we can proceed to a second round of questions. So let's proceed in the order, again, that's shown on the program. Penny, would you like to respond to all or any of these questions? Thank you. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, moderator. Maybe I'll take the question from Mr. Johnson regarding how the regions are, like ours, are sectorally organized, and the fact that we would rely on regional organizations that have competence in various areas to implement or to support national governments in the implementation of various aspects of the instrument. Regarding IFBs, I think we, in our region, we have success stories. There is direct linkages. I mean, for example, there are some Pacific colleagues in the room, but for example, UNEP, they have a direct linkage with our SPREP organization, the environment organization, I'm sure, as well as IMO, to SPC and a few other organizations. But I guess in this regard, I think we are still contemplating how we will move forward on implementation. What would work best? We have an opportunity now to do things differently. As I mentioned, the BBNJ instrument is forcing us to work in a different way. For example, as I mentioned in my intervention, that various aspects of the treaty fall within various organizations. It doesn't fall neatly into one particular organization. So that will be the issue that will, and I'm sure that national governments are the same, where the various aspects of the treaty fall in within different ministries. So that that is a reality that we will need to face head-on in the implementation of this particular treaty. But I guess the outreach to IFBs is directly, of course, but also through the respective various sectoral organizations in the region.
Thank you. Angelique, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I'll take Rama's question. Yeah, it's complex, right? It's a difficult one for countries to have to grapple with, and I think there's different levels of complexity, and it's just not about geographical scope of application. I think the first point is about definitions, for example. There may be different definitions of marine protected area, for example, in your domestic legislation versus what we anticipate we may do here. Which then brings up the approach in which you enact legislation. Are you going to integrate it into an existing framework, right? So is the Seychelles going to look at its Nature Conservancy Act and say, I will broaden the scope to include the high seas, or does it need a specific legislation for implementation of BBNJ, right? And I think those are questions that countries need to start grappling with in terms of approach. And I think there could be different ways of doing it, so I won't say that there's one way or another. I think the comment made by Khalil was a very interesting one about EIAs. And of course, many SIDS already have EIA laws in place. I think the question is around its applicability to the high seas. For example, certainly there are some SIDS that there's an actual visiting requirement for you to go on site. For example, are these elements going to also be easily enough translatable to the high seas context, I think is an interesting question. And whether we need to adjust, have something specific, adjust what we have, or actually have something specific. And happy to hear from Khalil, who probably spends more time than me thinking about this point. And then the other thing that I thought was very fascinating is sort of during the early days, and I note a good friend of mine from Dualos is here and was there during the early days, so he'll correct me if I'm wrong. But during the early days, as UNCLOS was developing, one of the things that countries did whilst enacting legislation to give effect to what would then become the Law of the Sea Convention was to include a phrasing along the lines of in line with international law, noting that it would continue to evolve and develop. So those are perhaps legislative techniques that could be considered by different governments as they domesticate. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So Juliet and Khalil, I'm conscious that we will need to move on to our second panel quite soon. So if you could both kind of answer briefly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be quick, and I'll try to answer the question that Daniel raised. So we're in the very early stages of determining how we're going to implement, give legislative force to the BBNJ agreement. One of the recommendations that we've received is that we give the force of law to the BBNJ agreement, and that rather than trying to develop separate national legislation, doing it that way would avoid the challenge that Angelique raised in the anecdote that she gave at the beginning of her intervention. So if we were to do that, for example, then we will still need to look at the administrative and regulatory measures that we would need to put in place, because they do not exist at the moment. In terms of Barbados, for example, and some other CARICOM member states, not all, but some. And so we would need to focus on those administrative arrangements to be put in place. And I'll just give a very, very quick example. So in terms of Barbados, and I think it would be true for most of the Caribbean community, we don't have navies, we have Coast Guards. And so the mandate of the Coast Guard, for example, or the regional security system would need to be expanded in order for them to be able to operate within the framework of this agreement. Thanks.
Thank you. Now I'll hand the floor to Khalil for a final set of responses to the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Rian. And I'll be very quick as well. Seeing that I have no legal training or no legal background, and some very legal questions were asked. But in my eyes, BBNJ legislation or legislation crafted that would be applicable to areas beyond national jurisdiction obviously needs to be guided by what is in the agreement. Where there's room for interpretation, this is where perhaps model legislation might be useful. But as Angelique highlighted, different states have different legal systems, so model legislation may not work. But where it can work, such as perhaps in the Caribbean region, maybe we should give it a try. So those are just my initial thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I just want to thank all of our panelists and the audience for what I think has been a really substantive and useful discussion. We need to move on to panel 2 soon, but I'll just hand the floor back to Ronan Long to close the panel. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Shireen. And again, I'd like to thank the Ambassador for taking time out of your schedule, the distinguished panelists, and really the wonderful audience, because we're competing this afternoon with these fantastic questions. Look, this conversation is ongoing. And of course, we're part of the International Maritime Organization, doing capacity building for 40 years, and we're there to support the needs of states across the world, particularly those states that are very active in international shipping. And we heard the statement this morning from IMO, a very proactive statement in relation to supporting these processes and some of the challenges that have to be overcome. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're on time. Thank you.
Sorry to take the microphone again. Just something we forgot to mention. There are some materials at the front here explaining our programs and programs at the university. If anyone would like to take any, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Long and Segment 1 panelists. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. My name is Miriam Balgos, and I'm the Executive Director of the Global Ocean Forum. I am greatly privileged to be part of this side event as the moderator of the segment that will focus on ongoing capacity building initiatives, advancing the BBNJ Agreement's ratification, and preparation for implementation. We have 4 distinguished panelists who will be sharing with us their work and perspectives on this topic. We will begin with Mr. Marcelo Olivares, the Director of the Institute of Public Policy and Project Lead for the Common Oceans Cross-Sectoral Project at the Universidad Católica del Norte. Mr. Olivares, please kindly share with us, how has the Common Oceans Cross-Sectoral Project contributed to national assessments of ABNJ situations and capacity to collaborate in ABNJ governance in its 2 pilot regions? Mr. Olivares, you have the floor.
Thank you, Miriam. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. To start, there's a common characteristic among countries, which is a strongly sectoral approach to and governance of ocean affairs. mainly focusing on their exclusive economic zones. Their activities in relation to ABNJ are mostly related to matters associated with fishing, with the fishing of migratory species. And in this context, the Common Ocean Cross-Sector Project, which is a global environmental facility funded project, is an initiative that's working in 2 pilot regions, the Southeast Pacific as well as the Pacific Islands, and it's working in developing or enhancing the functional capacity among national and regional offices for adapting existing and developing new mechanisms for cross-sectoral management in ABNJ. This United Nations Environment Program project, through the collection of information and the elaboration of national and regional ABNJ profiles for countries in the Southeast Pacific and the Pacific Islands region, aims to contribute to a more integrative characterization and study of the different activities that countries carry out in ABNJ, or that are indirectly but closely related to BBNJ. These profiles are in many cases a starting point in the assessment and characterization of countries' activities in ABNJ in a number of sectors such as fishing, environmental management, including pollution control, shipping, the participation in different governance bodies and research, among others. These national assessments provide the context for the preliminary identification of capacity needs for cross-sectoral ABNJ management across the target countries in the 2 pilot regions. This is done through interviews and group discussions, through which the project has identified capacity problems, needs, and gaps at the individual as well as the institutional level. This is the initial part of a 4-segment capacity needs assessment that includes also the formulation of performance objectives regarding the necessary skills and knowledge to be enhanced among the target population. Next slide, please. As shown on this slide, the problems identified so far include the institutional fragmentation, technical and scientific deficits, a lack of practical experience in ABNJ, knowledge lost due to high staff turnover in the institutions of the countries, conservation production tensions, and the lack of financial resources. This depiction of the causes and effects of the problems show how they are closely interrelated, and the project will address these problems in the subsequent phases of capacity needs assessments, which will focus on the critical functions that are related to collaboration and coordination in ABNJ management and governance.
Thank you, Marcelo. Next, we would like to hear from Ms. Christina Tigerson, Principal Expert on Ocean Governance and Geological Services and Project Lead for the Cross-Sectoral Project at Great Arundel, about the ABNJ governance platform being developed under the Cross-Sectoral Project and how its development is envisioned to contribute to cross-sectoral ABNJ management and governance and to the operationalization of the BBNJ Agreement's clearinghouse mechanism. Ms. Tigerson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you for the organizers to actually invite me to speak. So as Marcelo already presented the overall project, for the sake of time, I will dive straight into another major output of the project, which we call the ABNJ governance platform. So the governance platform is, of course, a web-based tool, and its main function will be to provide a knowledge resource for people working in the ABNJ area. It will provide the user with an overview of how activities are governed within the ABNJ. And on the slide here, you can see some of the pillars or building stones that we envision to have in this platform. And one of them is an easy access to ABNJ relevant key terminology and concepts. There'll be a little bit on UNCLOS, boundaries, and of course a searchable glossary to get on with the terminology. And we'll have access to relevant ABNJ information, which will, and that's actually the biggest thing of it, it's a searchable database that looks at international legal instruments, frameworks, and relevant global, regional, sub-regional, and sectorial bodies and how they link together. We will always also link to external information about ABNJ because that exists and should be utilized. We'll try to develop a contact directorate, so we'll see so people can contact each other working in the ABNJ governance. And of course also a calendar with conference and webinars, meetings and other relevant ABNJ governance. So this will be presented in a visual way, probably with interactive maps, graphics, tables, searchable database, as I said here, and of course some explanatory text. So in short, much of this information that I just presented or described is already available online, but it's scattered across different websites and documents, and it's time-consuming to piece it all together. And it's easily to miss pieces if you're new to the ABNJ area. Therefore, we're creating this platform to provide a holistic, cross-sectorial, cross-institutional overview of the ABNJ governance platform. And now to the first question that Miriam asked me. How will that help on the cross-sectorial ABNJ management and governance? Well, having access to information will help ABNJ personnel to orient themselves and see how their work sits within the broader ABNJ governance landscape. It will help spot areas where their work intersects with work of others and where their work cuts across sectorial boundaries, and see which agreements and governing mechanisms that are relevant. And again, will ease the cross-sectorial cooperation that we're trying to do and hopefully benefit the ocean. Now to the second question, which is related to how can the development of this platform contribute to the implementation of the BBNJ Agreement clearinghouse mechanism. Well, primarily, this governance platform will be a knowledge resource that will complement the BBNJ clearinghouse mechanism. As we operate in the same space, the ABNJ platform can be used as an information resource to update ABNJ national focal points about the BBN process. The platform can link to relevant parts in the BBNJ agreements and the clearinghouse mechanism, depending on an activity a nation would like to undertake. So in practice, right now, we're in the design phase, meaning that we are developing the front end, so the user interface, the back end that is behind with all the logic and the data management. Therefore, it's the perfect timing now to talk about possible synergies between the two, between the ABNJ and the BBNJ, and how efficiently we can signpost and hyperlink the BBNJ clearinghouse mechanism into the ABNJ platform. So to conclude, please do contact us with questions and ideas about using the ABNJ platform to support the BBNJ process. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Next, we would like to hear from Dr. Maria Amalia Rodriguez Chavez, a lawyer serving the Ecosystems Program of the Inter-American Association for Environmental Defense, AIDA, on how AIDA assists Latin American countries in ensuring the participation of stakeholders in the BBNJ Agreement ratification process. Dr. Rodriguez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Miriam, and thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. So AIDA is a member of the High Seas Alliance, and we have been working for several years now following the BBNJ negotiations and now working hard towards that BBNJ implementation. So our main action line has been strengthening the capacities and support of the Latin American states with the High Seas Alliance and other organizations in the region. And through the years, we have coordinated various formats of capacity building events, as you can see on the slide, such as science tours, BBNJ informative sessions, and regional workshops, which encompasses a variety of stakeholders. For example, we have coordinated back-to-back informative sessions for states, but also for civil society, NGOs, and academia in our region. Particularly for Latin America, the dissemination of information for a broad range of stakeholders in Spanish is also an important element that I wanted to highlight today, because language can provide further engagement, understanding, and ownership of the BBNJ discussions. Furthermore, in the capacity building events that we organize, we also try to ensure that the speakers of these meetings are experts from the region, again, to reinforce the ownership of the process and to make it closer to the hearts of our participants. AIDA and HISIS Alliance also work on raising awareness on the critical importance to be part of the agreement and trying to keep high the ambition of states and other stakeholders. Likewise, we develop materials, including technical briefings translated into a variety of languages, social media. We also develop practical tools like the treaty tracker, where you can find which countries have signed or ratified the treaty, and we also work on other visual assets that are engaging with broader audiences. In finalizing, and more specifically on stakeholders' participation, the HISIS Alliance has developed an Indigenous peoples and local communities policy brief, and also some guiding action lines for the membership to further engage on this very important topic. And from AIDA, we will be starting working on this matter in the upcoming months. Lastly, AIDA is also supporting Foreign Affairs Costa Rica in a recent initiative to start the development of an area-based management tool proposal for the thermal dome, that is an oceanographic feature and a biodiversity hotspot in the Eastern Central Pacific, within which, as you all know, consultation processes with different stakeholders will be taking place, ensuring the participation of a wide variety of views, which is of critical importance as we are talking about global commons. Thank you, Miriam.
Many thanks, Maria Amalia. Our final panelist is Dr. Paul DeBrain, the Executive Secretary of the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, who will speak on the financial resources available from the Global Environment Facility to support developing countries in their ratification of the BBNJ Agreement. Mr. DeBrain, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. So I'm going to provide some clarity on the resources that are available and being mobilized from Jeff to be able to assist and help developing countries in the ratification and the early implementation of the BBNJ Agreement. And I apologize, I am the Executive Secretary of the IOTC, but I'm actually speaking on behalf of FAO at the moment, who are mobilizing these funds. So if there's something I'm a little uncertain about, I do apologize, but I can follow up and find any information that people might find as necessary afterwards. So basically, to provide some context, FAO, UNEP, and UNDP are currently collaborating closely with Jeff on two complementary projects. The first is the National Enabling Activities and Ratification Support Project, and the second is the Global and Regional Support Project for BBNJ Ratification and Implementation Readiness. So two very nice, succinct, and easy to remember names that if anybody has any issues, they can come and find out about them from me. So firstly, the National Enabling Activities Project provides direct national level funding. And this is up to a value of $175,000 per eligible country. And the idea with this is to support the needs-driven activities related to ratification and implementation readiness. Now, this can include institutional, legislative, and regulatory assessments, legal and policy gap analyses to align frameworks with the BBNJ Agreement, the drafting of national legislation, stakeholder consultations and awareness raising, the development of national implementation strategies, and any other activities that the countries can identify as priorities for this process. And the countries can access this support by contacting directly the FAO, the UNEP, or UNDP. And in fact, FAO is already currently working with a number of countries to facilitate access. And so we're encouraging all interested countries to reach out to us should they require any assistance. Then the second project that I mentioned is in the final stages of approval from Jeff. So it's not quite ready yet, but it should soon commence. And this providing complementary global and regional support program, which is jointly, again, being implemented by FAO, UNEP, and UNDP. And again, this project is slightly different. It's to provide tools and resources and coordination to support the implementation of the process at a national, regional, and global level. So it expands a little bit on what the previous project I mentioned was dealing with. And this project has three components. The first component is the compilation and development of capacity building modules, awareness raising, and outreach material on the BBNJ Agreement. The second component is the delivery of trainings and workshops and information dissemination for building awareness and capacity. And lastly, the component 3 is the support and coordination of national level BBNJ ratification and implementation of readiness activities. So you can see that this is very different from the previous project. It's more of a multi-level and interlinked approach. And it's designed to strengthen national capacity and to foster regional cooperation, while also promoting global collaboration and knowledge exchange, and lastly, ensuring the readiness for the rapid entry into force and effective implementation of the BBNJ Agreement. Although these projects are being led by FAO, UNEP, and UNDP, there is close collaboration with DOALIS as well, and the program is expected to commence in the coming months following final GEF endorsement. So just in summary of the information I provided, the National Enabling Activities Project provides direct country resources. The Global and Regional Support Project complements this by providing broader capacity building coordination, as well as tools at a regional and international level. So together, these initiatives should provide a strong package of support to help developing countries move quickly towards the ratification and the readiness for implementation of the BBNJ Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. We now turn to the question and answer portion of this segment, and we will welcome 3 questions from the floor. Because we only have 10 minutes for this Q&A, I kindly request for questions and the answers to be concise and straight to the point so we can maximize the use of this time. So we will take all the questions first, like we did in the first segment, and then the panelists concerned will take their turns responding. Please. Yes, please. Kindly identify yourself first.
My name is Saida Rodriguez from Conservation International. Thank you very much for this amazing panel and sharing this information. I have a question for Dr. Rodriguez. Dr. Rodriguez, you actually mentioned very important points about ownership during this process of ratification of BBNJ and the importance of language and using Spanish to get that ownership. I would like to know if there are specific challenges that you have found in the Latin American region about the implementation or the ratification process for BBNJ. Do you have any specific or particular examples on that? Thanks.
Okay.
There's one question there.
Oh, yes, sir.
There's also one there, maybe. The woman with the laptop.
Yeah. Yes, sir, please.
Hello. Thank you very much. My name is Bart van Daskunst. I'm with DOALIS. And it's amazing to see hear all the activities that are being organized by everybody here on this panel and the previous panel. And I just would like to use this opportunity to maybe add one of those activities, namely, as noted by the Secretary earlier this week, a global call for submissions of information was sent to states in July, together with a link to an online questionnaire to be completed by 30 September 2025. And the goal of this is to inform the development of a publication of case study aimed at facilitating sharing experiences of states in becoming parties to the agreement and implementing it. The publication is envisaged under a project funded by the EU and implemented by the division as part of its program of activities to promote a better understanding of the BBNJ agreement and prepare for its entry into force. And we, of course, welcome submissions by states to this online questionnaire. The QR code is on the wall there in CR4, and I have a couple of business cards here, and I'm happy to distribute those. So thank you very much for this opportunity to add to the amazing array of activities already organized. Thank you.
Thank you for flagging that. Any other questions, please? I don't see any additional questions right now, so perhaps Dr. Rodriguez may respond to that first question?
Thanks, Miriam, and thanks, Aide, for that question. Yeah, I think that ownership in the different regions, it's very important because one of the things that we have seen through the years that we have accompanied a lot of delegates, it's how people fall in love with BBNJ, and that really makes a difference when they really care about what will be the final development of what we are discussing at the UN. One of the challenges that we have seen through the years is and I think that, Marcel, you mentioned it before, about the rotation of government officers. So we had like a generation of delegates that were here during the negotiations, but then all of a sudden, of course, because of their national dynamics, they are posted into another country or in another issue. And there, I think that the NGOs do provide this kind of bridge to fulfill those gaps in capacities or trying to strengthen the capacities of the new delegates and how we can speed them up because it's a very fast conversation happening always in the BBNJ elements. And the other thing is that, as we are all aware, there are some imbalances on the resources and the capacities of the different governments. So you can see here in one meeting, 2 delegates from capital, but then the next meeting, there's none. So it's something that I think from civil society, we try to really help on trying to bridge those gaps and try to inform as much as we can the new government officers that are taking care of the BBNJ discussions. Thanks.
Thank you, Maria Malia. Any other questions? If you don't have any other questions, to take advantage of the presence of panelists here and their expertise, I would like to pose a question to them now. And the question is, what do you foresee as the capacity development challenges for countries in the implementation of the BBNJ Agreement? So we can start with Dr. DeBruyne.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
What do you foresee as the capacity development challenges for countries in the implementation of the BBNJ Agreement from the perspective of your position as IOTC Executive Secretary, please?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. I mean, there are a lot of capacity limitations that we see, particularly in the region where we function, which is the Indian Ocean. It's largely ringed by developing countries. And so the capacity in many respects is very low. And I think that there is a couple of different areas that need to be focused on. The one is a broader understanding of exactly what the BBNJ is. And I think there's extreme capacity building that's needed to help the countries to understand what the process involves and what their responsibilities to the process will be. Once you get to that level, from our point of view, it'll be the technical aspects then. So you're going to be trying to get awareness of how this agreement can be ratified and how that can be put into national legislation. And then also some of the more technical issues, such as what part of the scientific aspects they now need to cover, things like looking at area-based management tools, genetic resources, things like that. So I see that as being the big challenges and something that we'll be working very hard with our member countries to ensure that the process is as smooth and as easy as possible for those who ratify it, of course.
Thank you so much, Paul. May we have your perspective, Marcelo?
Thank you, Miriam. I must say again that language is very, very important in Latin American countries to access the information and be part of the discussions. I also think that a challenge is, in terms of capacity development, relates to how do countries develop these capacities that are not really, that actually is not in their current activities. Like, for example, a country may be very interested in the regulation of migratory species, but will not have capacities for the other topics in the BBNJ agreement. So how do countries develop these capacities, or the interest in these other parts of the agreement is very, very important. And I also think that scientific collaboration to strengthen the resources for science and technology in these countries is important as well, as also acknowledging that many times cross-sectoral management, without even going into the areas beyond national jurisdiction, it's already a challenge for the countries in ocean affairs. So thank you.
Thank you, Marcelo. Christina, please.
Yeah, so building on the last thing Marcelo said, the cross-sectoral cooperation, which is difficult even in EEZ, it's probably going to be even more difficult in the ABNJ and BBNJ area. And that's sort of one of the reasons why we're building this platform, to really show how you can benefit from cooperating and between sectors and really helping people understand the terminology and all these different bodies that control the area.
Thank you so much, panelists, for all these responses and sharing of your body of knowledge, experience, and perspectives on this very important question of capacity. To take us to the conclusion of this side event, may I now call on Ms. Susan Gardner, Director of the Ecosystems Division at the United Nations Environment Program, for the side event wrap-up. Ms. Gardner, over to you, please.
Well, thank you, Miriam. We certainly have heard a lot, haven't we? And we've become, I think, all of us here in this room, in our nice, warm blue bubble of BBNJ, we've heard, we've all become very familiar with this idea of the ocean as the heritage of humankind, that it belongs to no one, and yet it belongs to all of us, that we all share in its benefits, and so we all share in the responsibilities. And for all of us here in this room, we're very comfortable with those ideas. And there's very few precedents actually available for what we're trying to do here, protecting areas beyond national jurisdiction at the scale of ambition that we're talking about, which is why the BBNJ Agreement, it's more than a legal instrument. It's actually testing our creativity, as we can hear in these halls and these conversations. It's testing our collaboration and our collective will to actually shape the future of ocean governance. And that's why conversations like this one are so important. It's the examples that you share and the way that you're getting things done, and it's the success that we can celebrate together, and it's the challenges that we can all learn from each other. We heard right away from the beginning with Ambassador Nula, who opened this event by reminding us this is right now a really critical moment. And we have so many complex challenges, both for ratification as well as for implementation, due in part because it is such a wide subject matter, and the challenges to attract engagement, to raise awareness under such a broad area of topics. In our first panel, there was a unanimous expression of the value of regional cooperation, but it was clear there's not one size that's going to fit all to support national level governance. And the SIDS can describe a variety of examples as a group of very diverse countries that have fundamental differences. So you have to look at the individual capacities and experiences in order to understand what are those gaps and where are the needs, in order to be able to tailor processes to the domestic situation, to the domestic legal systems, including establishing a large range of administrative and policy measures. But in the end, what we heard was that this can actually result in strengthening existing regional institutions. It can enable structured approaches where we get to learn from each other, not only in the region, but globally. In the second panel, we got to see some concrete examples of this in action, how this is really working with cross-sectoral cooperation for ABNJ integrated management. It's not easy because of fragmentation. We heard about the gaps of science and knowledge. We heard about gaps in finance. But we heard about solutions in terms of web-based tools that make data accessible. We heard about links to available information that actually connect all of us. And we heard about the support of the UN system, working together in cooperation, FAO, UNDP, UNEP, with support from the GEF for having national enabling activities, complemented by global and regional support. DWALIS offering more examples of mechanisms that help us all connect. And how that accessibility is key including through language capacity to meet stakeholders where they live, right? Where they are putting their attention. Social media, policy briefs, workshops, the kinds of things that are reaching broader audiences. This is what I heard. This is what I think we all heard. Learning from each other is fundamental to success. Learning from the frontline experiences and leadership of the SIDS. Learning from indigenous peoples and from local communities. From biodiversity-related MEAs, from Jeff-supported national enabling activities, from the regional seas conventions and action plans, which UNEP has been very proud to have hosted for 50 years of experience. I have to add that in. You didn't hear that, but now you've heard it here. But let's not forget, BBNJ, it's about protecting nature and delivering benefits for people. So it's about equity, it's about food security, it's about making sure that the wealth of the high seas from its genetic resources and its ecosystem services is shared fairly and is used sustainably, and that those who have contributed the least to the degradation of the ocean are not left out of the solutions or the benefits. So I would say, just in closing, to achieve what we set out to do, frankly, to achieve what we simply have to do for our blue planet, for our shared heritage, we have to work closely together. And I don't think anyone put it quite as well as Dr. Rodriguez Chavez, who said, okay, we need to work together because this enables us to learn about and therefore to care about BBNJ. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gardner. And thank you for the challenge that you just posed to all of us. But on behalf of Professor Long and the World Maritime University team, the Global Ocean Forum Secretariat, I would like to thank all the panelists, Ambassador Nwala, Ms. Gardner, the audience for your questions and interest in this topic that is so important in order to implement the BBNJ agreement. So please feel free to contact any of the panelists if you have additional or follow-up questions. So this event is now closed. Thank you so much.